there anyone here who's afraid of snakes? Anyone? Oh, I see a lot of hands. Those of you that didn't raise your hand, what if it was a rattlesnake and it was sitting on top of your head right now? Would you be afraid? Okay, now I have most of you. So everyone, imagine there is a rattlesnake sitting on top of your head. And I come in and I say, I have important things I need to tell you so you can take great care of yourself. How much would you hear with a snake on your head? That's what I'm thinking, not very much, right? And yet, every day in healthcare that happens. People walk into our doors and they're afraid. And we tell them very important things and they can't hear us. Now, I'm a nurse, and so a lot of what I'm going to share with you, my research, happened in healthcare. But what I have learned in the last few years is it translates into other settings. So I challenge you as I go through this to think about your customers, your team, and you yourself, and how this might apply to you. I first learned about the snake and fear in healthcare from Colleen Sweeney. Colleen is a nurse, and from her work, she realized that almost everybody walked into our doors afraid, and she coined the term clinicophobia for fear of healthcare. Clinicophobia, fear of healthcare. This became very real to me when in 2014, my husband Barry was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer. I don't know if you know this or not, but Barry is the only person who has ever had stage 3 colon cancer before. At least that's exactly how I felt the minute I heard those words. I'm a nurse in one of my hospitals with my friends and colleagues taking care of Barry, and I found myself thinking, I know there's other patients here, but this is Barry, and he has colon cancer. Wow. At that moment, I realized every patient and family who walks in the doors believes that their loved one is the sickest, most important person that you're taking care of, every single one. The other thing that happened while Barry was in the hospital was I had a notebook, and I would write down things people would tell me. I'm a note taker, and I'd write down things people would tell me. And one night I went back and looked at my notebook, and I said, I never heard that. They never told me. It was in my handwriting. I heard it, but I didn't hear it. Again, I'm a nurse. I was not in a foreign place. I've spent a lot of time in hospitals, and they weren't speaking a foreign language to me because we do speak a little bit different English in hospitals. And yet I couldn't hear what people were saying to me. That snake was real. The other thing I realized is that, we would oftentimes notice that people would be angry with us, and it seemed out of proportion for what had happened. And what I have realized is that when people are coming at you angry, what emotion is oftentimes under that anger? It's fear, right? They're afraid, and it comes out, it's manifested as anger. Well, when people are angry, our tendency is to either push back or flee. Will either of those reactions help someone who's scared? What if instead we leaned in to learn about that fear? What was their biggest fear, worry, concern? How could we help them? And you know what would happen? We would take care of that fear and the anger as well. So in 2018, I decided I wanted to learn more about this fear, what people were afraid of when they walked in our doors, and what was the most important thing we could do to help people. I recruited 4 wonderful nurses who were bilingual, who interviewed over 200 patients and families actually in the hospital. Some were inpatients, and some were outpatients, some were there for surgery, and some were in the ER. And we just asked 2 questions. What was your greatest fear, worry, or concern when you came in today? And the second question was, what is the most important thing we could do? Well, just like Colleen told me, almost everyone came into the hospital with fears. They were all afraid. The fears varied. It might be, will my loved one, will they be okay? Will this hurt? And what's this going to cost? Will I understand what people are going to say to me? The fears varied. But the same thing, 3 things came up as the most important things we could do. It didn't matter the setting. Keep me informed, keep me safe, and keep me comfortable. The same 3 things. Now, I hope I've already demonstrated to you with the analogy of the snake that if people don't feel safe, which is different than being safe, and feel comfortable, then they're not going to hear the information we're telling them. Remember my notebook. So an interesting thing then happened in March of 2020. One of my favorite nurses, Rachel, said to me one day, "Mindy, I'm so worried I'm going to make a mistake. I can't focus. I can't concentrate." And I said, "Rachel, you have a snake on your head." Now, I had taught this for a long time, so she knew what I meant. And she said, "You're right, I do." Think about March of 2020, being a nurse in a hospital. It was scary. Information was changing by the minute, and Rachel was afraid. And while she was afraid, she couldn't focus and she couldn't concentrate. At that moment, I realized that there's other times that the team is afraid. One is when you get a new boss. A new leader comes in, and people are wondering, okay, who is this new leader, and what are they going to change, and what do they expect of me, and what is their hot button I better never push, right? I see a lot of you nodding. And while people are afraid, just like Rachel, they can't focus and they can't concentrate. Another time is when you get a new job. Think of your first day of your last job. How were you feeling that day when you went to work? You're probably excited and maybe a little bit scared, right? And what happens on that first day? We throw all this information at you. How much are you going to hear? When you're wondering, did I make a good decision? Am I going to fit in here? Am I going to be comfortable here? And my third one is when an organization is going through major change. A lot of people get scared, a little bit nervous, worried, anxious when there's change going on in the organization. And you know what they need? Those same 3 things. Keep me informed, keep me safe, and keep me comfortable, just like our patients and families. So I don't think it would be nice for me to stand up here and tell you that people that you interact with are afraid without giving you some tips about what you might be able to do, right? So I have a couple for you today. The first one, Stephen Covey says, when we listen with the intent to understand rather than the intent to reply, that's when true relationship building and communication happens. When we listen with the intent to understand rather than the intent to reply. When people are afraid, they want that relationship, that connection, that trust. So sit down, make eye contact, and listen, truly listen. My second tip is that everybody wants to be the most important person you're talking to that day. Everybody wants to feel special. Learn one thing about the person sitting in front of you that has nothing to do with why they're there. When you first learn one thing about them, they begin to feel special. They begin to feel important, and they'll feel more comfortable and be able to relax. My third tip is that words matter. Words matter. First of all, avoid technical terms. When people are scared and have that snake on their head, it's hard for them to process technical terms, so use everyday language. And then, something interesting. I have learned that if we know people want to feel informed, safe, and comfortable, use those words, and they'll begin to feel that way. If I say, I want to make sure you understand everything, I'm going to explain everything to you every step of the way. I want to make sure that you feel safe and comfortable with our plan today and where we're going and what we're going to be doing. When you use those words, people feel informed, safe, and comfortable. So do that. And lastly, one of the things I like to do is when I'm finished, is to just lean in. Remember my notebook here. I want to make sure they've heard me. So I'm going to lean in and say, we've been through a lot. I want to make sure I was clear. I'm going to blame me. I'm going to make sure I was clear. Tell me what you heard. What are our next steps? So I can make sure that information actually got in. There's one more time I want to share with you that snake shows up. And that is, it sometimes shows up in our lives. See, I have this wonderful mentor, Joe Ty, and Joe is a writer, and he's a speaker, and he's a wonderful human being, and he pushed me and poked me to write a book, and I finally did. And when I was done, I looked at Joe and said, I'm never publishing this, though. It's not long enough. It's not important enough. It's not good enough. Nobody's going to want to read it. And Joe looked at me and he said, Mindy, you have a snake on your head. I go, Joe, you can't use that on me, right? That's my stuff. But Joe was exactly right, I did. I was scared. And then he said something very powerful. He said, Mindy, that snake is not on your head, it's in your head. It wasn't on my head, it was in my head. I had control over it. Where is there a snake on your head or in your head? What is something that you would like to accomplish, but fear might be holding you back? How can you feel safe, informed, and comfortable so that you can get over your fear and move on? Could it be a new job, a new career move, a book you would like to write, or perhaps you have a great idea that you would like to stand up here on this stage and share with the TEDx community? Find that way to get the information you need to feel safe and comfortable. What if all of us could become really good at recognizing when people are afraid and leaning in with compassion and learning about that fear and how we might be able to help them? Remember, when people are afraid, there's 3 things they really want from us. Keep me informed, keep me safe, and keep me comfortable. Thank you for listening and for making a difference.